Hello, and welcome to the professional webinar for the month of June. We're very lucky today to have some more information about implantable brain-computer interface collaborative community, which is an organization that's working to ensure that when all these new technologies are becoming available, that they will be good technologies and available to everyone. I'm Nurse Linda. I have brown hair. I'm lightly pigmented skin. I wear clear glasses. I have on a blue sweater, and I'm sitting in front of the Christopher Reeve background, which is navy blue with some Reeve colors on it. So I'd like to introduce this group of four today, which is a very impressive panel that we have today. And I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. So we'll start with you, Jen.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm thrilled to be here. I am joining you with a white background. I'm a woman with a fair complexion and short hair, wearing a colorful scarf with a white shirt and a tan vest. I am the executive director of Neurotech Network, as well as the past president of the North American Spinal Cord Injury Consortium. I live with tetraplegia due to a spinal cord injury that took place, 27 years ago. And I have been very privileged to have an implanted neuroprosthesis that allows me to use my paralyzed limbs to stand and move short distances and for other exercises. So I use that experimental device on a daily basis. So great to be here.
Hi, I'm Jessica Kelemen, and I am the program manager of the IBCI collaborative community. And I am sitting in front of a gray background, a very closed-in space. It's actually an office phone booth, and I have long brown hair and also pale complexion. And I am very excited to be here today.
Good afternoon. I'm Leigh Hochberg. I have a similarly pale complexion. I'm wearing a gray-blue heatherish blazer and a light blue shirt and a tie. And there's a cup of coffee nearby me. Behind me is a whiteboard that's recently been erased. I'm also sitting probably about 10 yards at most from Jessica, who's in a phone booth, but we're in the same building. I'm a critical care neurologist at Massachusetts General Hospital and Harvard Medical School. I'm also on the engineering faculty at Brown University and part of the Center for Neurorestoration and Neurotechnology at the Department of Veterans Affairs in Providence, Rhode Island. My other roles are as leading the BrainGate Consortium, which is an implantable brain-computer interface team across multiple institutions. And then together with Jennifer and Jessica, I have the great pleasure of co-organizing the implantable brain-computer interface collaborative community, which we'll be talking about a little bit more today. Thank you.
And I'm Cristin Welle. I'm a professor at the University of Colorado in neurosurgery and physiology. And this is my second time speaking to this group. So I'm really pleased to be able to come back and speak to everyone. And I am here in my office where I am sitting in front of a plant and an illustration of neurons on the wall. And I also have a pale complexion and blonde hair. And in addition to being a professor here, I am the Reeve Foundation liaison to the Implantable Brain-Computer Interface Collaborative Community. So great to be here.
Thank you all for coming today. This is going to be quite the show because this is what people are asking for. So great. Let's go ahead and just dig right in. Tell me about the brain-computer interface. Now, just what exactly is that? What does it do? What's the purpose? What's the goal for all of this?
So I'm happy to jump in there because I actually have a brief presentation prepared that will address those questions. But Leigh and Jen, also feel free to jump in as I pull up my slides. All right. Shared screen successful? Great. Okay, so I will address the question at hand, but I want to note that I also have a little bit of bonus content at the end. So after I talk about what implantable brain-computer faces are, I will also talk about how the IBCI collaborative community is working to advance the implantable brain-computer interface field. So implantable brain-computer interfaces, or IBCIs, are being developed to support greater independence for people living with paralysis. And these technologies aim to make everyday activities like using a phone, managing your finances, or shopping more accessible by translating thoughts directly into digital commands. And I'll just get into a little bit more detail into how that works. So normally the brain sends signals from the cortex through the brainstem and spinal cord and then on to the rest of the body, enabling a person to move their hand, speak a word, or type on a device, for example. And that's how we often interact with the world around us, through communication and movement that are driven by brain activity. However, in spinal cord injury and other conditions, that connection between the brain and muscles gets disrupted. The brain still forms the message, but the message can't travel to the muscles. And that interruption can make it difficult or even impossible to move or speak using the usual pathways. And BCIs aim to bypass the site of interruption and restore function through technology by picking up signals from the brain that reflect your intent, like moving a hand or saying a word. And then they can send that information directly to a computer, tablet, or assistive device. Now, I want to get into a little bit about the I of IBCIs that we mentioned earlier. And the I stands for implantable. And BCIs can be categorized into two types. So one is implantable, and then the other is wearable, or also called non-invasive. And the key thing to highlight here is that implantable brain-computer interfaces have sensors that are surgically implanted either under the scalp or skull, on the brain, in the brain, or otherwise adjacent to the brain. And this proximity to the brain enables the sensors to pick up high quality brain signals. And that could potentially enable for more capabilities and more reliable control than sensors that might be further from the brain. And then, whereas with wearable BCIs, those are more like a cap or a headband that goes on the surface of the head. It is not surgically implanted. And they might require a care partner or a person that's willing to assist to set up the device. And because those sensors are not as close to the brain, they don't have as high of a resolution. And so we believe that the capabilities can be pretty different between these two types. So I'll go into a little bit more about implantable BCIs since that is our focus. So IBCIs actually have a pretty long academic history dating back to the 1960s with motor cortex decoding in monkeys. But it's really only within the last few years that we have begun the steps for commercial translation, which means getting IBCIs to the people who need them. And embarking on this process has raised a host of critical unanswered questions. These include questions like, which clinical specialties will be prescribing and then maintaining IBCIs? What are the right outcome measures for IBCIs? What happens if a commercial entity of an IBCI goes out of business? And really just a host of other equally important questions, and they're not even all captured here. And to address these questions and help get IBCIs to the people who need them, our field came together to form the IBCI Collaborative Community, or the IBCICC. And this is where some of the bonus content comes in. So I'll go a little bit beyond defining IBCIs, if that's all right, and just talk briefly about who we are as the IBCICC and what we're trying to do. So we are made up of a wide range of over 400 stakeholders, including researchers, clinicians, regulatory experts, industry leaders, patient advocates, ethicists, and most importantly, people with lived experience of paralysis and their care partners. And we are actually the first FDA participating collaborative community in clinical neuroscience. And we're really fortunate to be able to gain and share perspectives with the incredible people at FDA's Neurologic Devices Office. Now, ordinarily, when companies and academic researchers interact with federal regulators, those discussions happen properly and for good reason in confidential silos. And the IBCICC provides for open, transparent discussion across stakeholders in a carefully constructed pre-competitive space. And this unique forum was created to reach well-informed consensus across a range of key issues in order to advance the development, safety and efficacy evaluation, and wide and equitable access to IBCI technologies. And the IBCICC aims to collaboratively address these critical questions through 7 topic-specific work groups. And I would say that all of these have relevance to the spinal cord injury community, but I'll just highlight a few to give you a sense of what we do without blasting you with too much information up front. So first, I'll highlight the user priorities/preferences and IBCI use cases work group. A bit of a mouthful, but really the point of this work group is to focus on understanding and incorporating the perspectives of potential users into the design, testing, and application of IBCIs. And next, I'll highlight the clinical practice guidelines work group. This work group is working to establish evidence-based guidelines to ensure safe and consistent care for individuals using IBCIs. And finally, I'll highlight the clinical study endpoints work group, which is driven by the need to clearly define measures that can be used to obtain regulatory approval of IBCIs. And as the IBCICC seeks to address this wide range of challenges in the IBCI field, your insights, those of people with spinal cord injury, care partners, and advocates, are really critical to making sure the field develops in ways that reflect real-world needs and priorities. And the IBCICC provides a space for your perspectives to shape the IBCI field. And I provided a picture and a quote here from an IBCI clinical trial participant to just kind of highlight the importance of incorporating people with lived experience of paralysis into the process every step of the way. But this does not stop at clinical trials, and the IBCICC is a really great forum for everyone with lived experience and beyond to include their input. And so with that, I would like to invite all of you to become a part of the IBCICC. You just need to go to our website at ibci-cc.org, and there will be a join button in that upper right corner there. And by joining the IBCICC, you can contribute your expertise, share your insights, and really help us guide the direction of the IBCI field. And you will not only be supporting the growth of life-changing technology, you're really helping us shape a future where individuals with spinal cord injury and other conditions have new and meaningful ways to regain function and independence. So we really welcome you to be involved in your able capacity. You can be an active participant in our regular meetings, contribute to offline activities, such as collaborating on files or providing feedback. Or you're also just welcome to join in once per quarter to provide your input. We really are flexible, so please just contribute as you're able, and we would just love you to provide your input in whatever way you can. And together, I really do believe we can make a difference, so I hope that some of you will be willing to help contribute. With that, I will stop sharing and pass it back to you.
Well, I have a couple of questions. First of all, let me make a statement, though. How wonderful that from the get-go, you are involving the community, which sometimes, things get decided for people in the community that might not be the decision that maybe they would like. So the input is very important. And this is such a wonderful opportunity. So I'm hoping that our listeners and supporters will feel free to just go right in. And it's wonderful because you're not committing to a lifetime of conversation, unless of course you want it to be. You could drop in, drop out. I love it. It's wonderful. Some of the questions that I have from your presentation is you had talked about the motor function, and in the picture of the gentleman using a device, he said he got to touch someone. In a lot of the recovery from neurological disease in general, we find that with motor recovery comes some sensory recovery, which comes much faster. And so, can you comment? Like this guy said, he got to reach out and touch someone. Did he get to feel that someone? Could he feel that someone? Could he sense that? Could you talk more about the interplay between that motor and sensory nervous system?
I'll be happy to. I'm pausing, waiting to see if Jessica wants to continue or to.
You go for it. I was going to hand it off to you. Yeah.
Okay, all right, very good. Hi, this is Leigh Hochberg again, and thanks, Nurse Linda, for your question. In the particular picture that Jessica was showing of a gentleman using an implantable brain-computer interface, what he and what others have been able to do is, even though they may have cervical spinal cord injury, may be unable to move their arm or hand, as they think about moving their own arm or hand, they've been able to control a robotic arm or robotic assistive device that was nearby that person. So as they think about reaching out, for example, to pick up a ball or to pick up a cup, a robot arm was moving somewhat in the manner in which that person's own arm and hand might have moved prior to the onset of injury. Sometimes, and early on in this brain-computer interface field, that is where the control stopped. That is, it was solely a motor function that was being restored with that robotic limb. But some more recent implantable brain-computer interface research attempts to restore some of the sensation by putting some of that information back into the nervous system. The way that's done is you can imagine one sensor, which we often think of as an array of electrodes, but a sensor on the brain that's reading information about the intent to move. A very similar sensor, if you flipped at least a figurative switch, would be able to stimulate or modulate neural activity right near those electrodes. And if those electrodes happen to be in a sensory part of the brain, such as the sensory cortex, which sits right behind the motor cortex, then as that robot arm reaches out and touches a ball or touches a coffee cup or touches even somebody else's hand, a sensor on that robotic or prosthetic limb would be aware, would sense that touch. And then that touch would be conveyed back to the implantable BCI, which would lead to a stimulation of sensory cortex and some kind of sensation that reflects that touch had happened. That sensation can even happen in a part of the brain that's specific to the hand, because we have a good sense for where hand-related sensory information is processed in the brain. So if there are electrodes there and they are stimulated, then a person can learn or can recognize that there's been some kind of contact. I will say, though, that these are still early days, but exciting days as we learn how to restore not only motor but also sensory function for people with cervical spinal cord injury and other diseases or injuries that lead to paralysis. And with that, I'll hand over to Jen.
Thanks, Leigh. He gave just this beautiful description of what it means from a physiological standpoint and from a technical standpoint of how we can reach out and touch. But I just wanted to add to his description, from a person living with a spinal cord injury, what does that mean? So it means that when we just think about things, we're able to move, but also how important sensation is. And we know that from talking to the community is even though I might be able to have movement in my hand, being able to feel whether a cup is hot or cold, being able to have that sense of touch means a lot of that wonderful feeling of knowing where your hand is in space as well. So there's a really rich dynamic between not just being able to move, but being able to feel and sense where your body is in space and being able to have that sense of touch that goes along with movement.
On with movement, let me ask this question. You mentioned, Jen, proprioception, which was coming to my mind as you were talking, because knowing where your body in space is a huge leap. But what about other internal functions that, we talk about movement. Everybody wants to move their hands, everybody wants to move their legs, Those are goals that people, tangible goals. We measure those in clinic. We measure how much movement you have. But what about things that happen inside the body that aren't visible but need to go on? So the first thing that pops into my head is bowel function. With this, we don't see the bowels work, but we know in the community that that's a big problem. And so we would love to see that. We would love to see bladder function, for sensation on the skin to prevent pressure injury, but also that proprioception. So how does that fit into all of these things, the internal body?
Yeah, I'll great question, and I will give the lived experience perspective and hand it over to Leigh as the neurologist to give us our physiological perspective. Is that I live with a spinal cord injury, and I will tell you, and our community speaks this all the time, that bladder and bowel is our number one priority, and let me tell you, it can take over our lives, and it has a huge impact on our daily lives. So when we think about, brain computer interface and being able to control bladder and bowel, we are not there yet. But one of the great discoveries that we've made from the research that happens within the Brain Initiative is really understanding that we have this brain gut connection, and we have our brain is very much connected to our internal organs. And there is a lot in terms of what happens in spinal cord injury and spinal cord dysfunction in terms of our autonomic functions, which also bladder and bowel are tied to. So, are we there now today? No. Could we get there in the future? Potentially. And I think as we start to develop a lot of these neurotechnologies, and being able to make further discoveries down the line, we will get there, but we are not there today. And I'd love to have Leigh to chime in from a physiological and from a neurological perspective.
Sure. Thanks, Jen. One of the great fun and opportunities of being on a panel together with Jen is that I don't actually have to say much because Jen is always right. And I just listen to Jen and reinforce what she said. I think the only thing that maybe I can add is just on the technical side is that what we hope is, as we're talking today largely about brain-computer interfaces, the restoration of motor control, the restoration of control over one's environment and computers and communication devices. Towards this question of bowel and bladder, there's a part of this field that generally is referred to as brain-spine interfaces. That is being able to record brain activity associated with intention, so intention to move. That could be as well intention to initiate bowel or bladder functions. And then using those signals to stimulate the spinal cord or the peripheral nerves that are associated with bowel and bladder functions. So I do think that is a possibility going forward as we learn more and more about what are the right triggers for being able to stimulate either the spinal cord or the peripheral nerves nearby that are responsible for controlling bowel and bladder functions. And maybe even towards being able to record those signals that may be local near in and around the spinal cord related to bowel or bladder function, and then transmitting that signal of fullness, most importantly, back up to the brain. So I think that those are, it is still early days, but the importance of it is clear to everyone in this neuroengineering community, and I'm hopeful that we're going to see additional progress.
That certainly sounds exciting. I was wondering when you mentioned, Jessica, in your presentation, you had the internal devices and the external devices. You guys are focusing on the internal, which is clear, but there are also these external devices. We've had some companies on that have talked about their transdermal stimulation, which is externally put a piece of tape over the spinal column, and the people are regaining some function in that way. How does your group see these two internal and external um, engineering projects merging together in the future, or do you think one is going to take precedence over the other? And look into that crystal ball and tell me how that's going to be. Can anyone predict? We won't hold you to it, but just, what are your thoughts on that?
mean, I guess I can start, and then Leigh or Jen feel free to jump in. But implantable BCIs are a medical device, and so they're really meant to restore, you know, like certain levels of function. And like I said earlier, they record higher qualities of signals than externally placed BCIs. And so we have a lot of hope on the types of things that those can achieve, and the early research seems pretty promising in that. Um, and so that's kind of like between IBCIs and BCIs that would be placed on the scalp. And then you also alluded to some other types of external devices, such as a stimulation device that might be placed on the spine. And I won't speak to that particular device because I'm not familiar with it, but I will say that implantable BCIs do have the capability of sending signals and messages to other types of external devices. So for something like that, there could be potential for IBCIs to send signals to it. I don't know what the use case for that would be in particular. So if Leigh knows more, I'm sure he will jump in and tell you. But yeah, so there's definitely potential for IBCIs to control various types of effectors.
Right. Thanks, Jessica. What I can add to that is, as this field has developed of brain-computer interfaces, there has been lots of kind of engineering and neuroscience-based discussion about the relative value of implantable versus not implanted or scalp-based technologies for recording. If I put all the science and engineering to the side and I just keep the doc hat on, that is the physician hat on, the right device is the one that the patient or the user selects based not only what they're hoping to gain from that device, but its relative risk and benefit profile. If there are devices that do everything one wants and it works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it doesn't require surgery, that is likely to be preferred to the exact same device that is fully implanted. But it is likely that there will be advantages to fully implanted devices that can take advantage of the really rich information that can be recorded from on or in the brain. By the same token, there will be some people who may be interested in one, or what I hope are going to be several devices that will be out on the market within the next handful of years. And then not only will they be able to select and learn about these different devices and choose the right one for them, but it may be that for any number of medical reasons that some devices will be more appropriate than others. So, I hope that both the implantable and the non-implantable BCI fields continue to expand and continue to demonstrate benefit for the people who we are all hoping will benefit from these devices. But ultimately, it's going to be a discussion between patient, physician, between user and clinician. And I really look forward to having all of those opportunities to be able to talk about those devices and make them available.
So let's talk about what you just said about patients who would benefit from these devices. Can you be more specific in a sampling of diagnostic codes? Because obviously there's going to be a lot of people. And most people think, oh, people with spinal cord injury, but it would be much a larger group than just people with SCI. Can you list some of those diagnoses out for the people who are listening?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about brain-computer interfaces, we usually really try to simplify the definition, which helps us to think about the different people who may benefit from them. So I think about a system, just as Jessica was describing before, that records neural activity, interprets it in real time, and then does something useful with it. And if we keep the definition that simple, then we can begin to think about not only somebody with cervical spinal cord injury thinking about using their own hand and being able to either control a robotic assistive device or perhaps their own limb if we connect a BCI to either a soft robotic exoskeleton or soft wearable robotics or even implantable functional electrical stimulation systems. But we can think about people with different types of stroke. Brainstem stroke initially, people who have brainstem stroke are often unable to move. They may become tetraplegic or tetraplegic. Sometimes are also unable to speak. People with ALS, that is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis or Lou Gehrig's disease, progressively can lose the ability to move and to speak. If we think more broadly, people with other neuromuscular diseases also can either rapidly or slowly lose the ability to move and or the ability to speak. There are also people who, around the time of birth, can have any number of types of brain injuries that lead to difficulty with either movement or speech. And the next generation of brain-computer interface research will be focused on hopefully being able to provide value for people who may not have learned initially to be able to move in a typical manner or to speak in a typical manner. And it's possible that BCIs, implantable BCIs, will be helpful in that regard. But really, just kind of sitting way back, if somebody is attempting to move but they're unable to, then to some extent, regardless of the nature of the disease or injury that led to that condition, there's possibility that an implanted brain-computer interface may be helpful.
While we're on that subject, do you envision ways that this interface is going to get into the brain? Open cranial surgery? Do you envision in the future maybe a little hole with the needle dropping something in, maybe a capsule that you take that will magically find its way up there? What is the future on getting that device into the brain?
Well, it depends just how much into the future you want me to think about it.
All the way. We're going George Jetson here.
All right. Well, my crystal ball becomes more and more cloudy with time, so I think we'll trying to keep this kind of in the near future. Certainly, there's two ways to get devices into the brain today, especially the types of devices that would record neural activity. One is through a very direct way, which is what a neurologist or neurosurgeon would call a craniotomy, which is removing a small piece of skull, exposing the brain, which is done thousands of times a day in neurosurgeries around the world, looking at the brain and placing a device into the right location or locations. So that's one, and that's a basic approach today. There's another approach, which is to get near the brain using the vasculature. So much like an angiography is sometimes performed for the heart, that a catheter can be thread from a large vein in either the, well, usually into the leg, up into the heart. Similarly, a catheter can be placed in either a vein in the leg or the neck, and then that catheter can float an electrode up into a vein that sits on top of the brain. That's one type. That's another way to get devices in or around the brain. And different companies are coming up with easier ways to be able to put other types of devices either on or in the brain. In the future, it may be that there are lots and lots of little devices that can be placed more easily. In addition to how they're placed, we have to think about how they're powered, because all of these devices somehow need to have a little bit of electricity, which can be either directly provided or provided through magnetic induced currents, allowing the sensors in the brain to be able to send that neural activity that they're recording back out to the computers that are understanding that activity. So, short answer, I guess, today the direct way is the way that we think about. Making that direct way simpler and faster is certainly a lot of the focus of some of the neuroengineering research that's happening. Do I think it's possible in the future that there may be other ways, either through the vasculature or otherwise, to get things into the brain? I do. I am hopeful that that will happen. You proposed taking a pill and having the electrodes get to the right place. I don't think I'm there yet. I support your interest in being able to get there. That feels like it may be further away, but clearly everybody in this field is focused on trying to provide the right technologies the right way as safely as possible, so they can provide benefit to the people who may hope to use them.
And if I could just add to it, Linda, is,
Please.
for those in the audience, and sometimes I do too, you get a little squeamish when we talk about, oh, you're going to open up my skull and you're going to put something into my brain. Just to give people perspective, we've been deep brain stimulation has been around for decades, and it's been used for Parkinson's disease and essential tremor and dystonia. So we've been putting electrodes into people's brains and being able to have treatments. There's also an RNS device for severe epilepsy. So we know that we can put electronics into people's brains and be able to read and sense from the brain and be able to stimulate. So there was a recent study done recently that shows about the safety of BCIs and comparing it to DBS and other RNS devices that have been put into brains, and we've been really to find that they've been at least so far been proven to be safe. I think, as we look to the future of new devices being created, and to really minimize some of the surgical risk and the surgical time of implanting those devices. Again, those will have to be evaluated by risk and efficacy. But I think the latest designs I get excited about is that they're trying to minimize the time in surgery, but also designing the devices for explantation as well. So if something does go wrong, are we able to take it out? So I think as people start to think about implanting devices into the brain, we are really getting into now a new generation of a field of devices for the brain. And I think that's what gets us really excited to see what's going to be coming here in the near future.
Oh, and I'm happy you brought up both of you brought up some of these other modes of getting things in the brain because people normally go right to the craniotomy and oh, I don't know if I want that. And that surgery is a big deal for people who have neurological disease. But when you think about catheters that are threaded through the body to fix somebody's heart, it is an everyday procedure now. It's done thousands of times in our country to fix people's hearts. Aneurysms in the brain, a catheter's threaded up. Talking about some of the treatments for neurological disease that are different brain stimulating kind of things. And there are a variety of different ways. So we've taken some of the fear out of that. I mean, you're talking about the brain, you're talking about serious anything inside your body, you're talking about serious things. But look at how far we've come already and how far we're going to be going. My next question is for Dr. Welle because Jessica brought up her bubble map with, the different projects, all the different groups that are working within your consortium. What about the connection with the Christopher Reeve? How does the Christopher and Dana Reeve paralysis fit into this? And how does this fit into Christopher Reeve?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that question. And, first off, as a liaison from the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation, I'm just so excited that we get to be a part of the IBCICC because as hopefully everyone's seen, there's a real emphasis in this collaborative community on bringing in all voices. So really bringing in all different kinds of people who are involved and interested in IBCI. And of course, that includes many people with lived experience and groups that are advocating and allies for people with lived experience. And so as a liaison for the Reeve Foundation, I am a member of the Clinical Outcomes Assessment working group. And well, I think that many, if not all of the working groups have real relevance for people involved in Reeve Foundation. I had to choose one to start, a place to start. And I think that we decided that for me to join the clinical outcomes group because this is really the key factor in determining how these technologies can come to actually get to market and actually be used by people who need them. So what is a clinical outcome measure? Essentially, this is the test, so to speak. It's the criteria that all of these different companies and investigators who are building these technologies will need to meet in order to be able to show that their device is actually safe, it's effective, and it's meaningful for for the people who are using it. And so having input on what those criteria are is really critical to make sure that when these devices are available clinically to the general public, that they really are providing the benefit that adds value to the lives of the people who are using them. So that's how the Reeve Foundation is fitting in right now. But I do want to plug what what we were talking about earlier, in that we need all the voices in the room and adding perspectives onto what these outcome measures should be. So I do truly encourage everyone on the call who's interested to join this collaborative community and give your input on what are the kinds of things that are most important that we should be assessing to make sure that when these devices are out on the market and can be used by people, that they're really doing the job they're supposed to do.
And that cannot be emphasized enough. You want information from the community, so please help formulate your own desires here. So I noticed, Jessica, in your bubble diagram that was so helpful with all the different committees and around that picture, and I'm sure within those groups there are subgroups, and I'm sure it just goes out exponentially. But one of the things that you mentioned is that you were looking at what happens if a company develops something, people get that apparatus device, that brain computer interface, and the company goes out of business. Because I've been around a long time and I've seen people who've gotten things and it goes out of business and there's nobody to service their product, and it gets into a whole big thing. So I especially appreciate, since it's a lived experience of my own, that this happens, that you're looking for that. So what kind of parameters do you have for ensuring, or will you have for ensuring, that people will be able to get the help they need after they get this device, and then down the line, because 10 years, 20 years, people could be living 50, 60, 70 years. If it's a child, they could be living 100 years with this device. So that's something to think about, isn't it? How will those sidebars keep things going? I mean, I know it's perspective now, but what are your thoughts on that?
I'd love to defer this question to Jen, because she actually gave a really great talk on this exact topic recently and has some good
All
thoughts.
right.
Thanks, Jessica. Linda, I have to fully appreciate that, and that's kind of this realm and the discussion around how we've defined abandonment, and that can happen if a company goes out of business. I think what I get really excited about for the collaborative community is that abandonment is and when companies go out of business, it's a very complex issue. It's not just pointing at one company. There's economic factors, there's regulatory issues, there's payer issues that come along with this. And also conundrums for clinicians as well as the person that actually has that implanted device. And in the collaborative community, can we stop a company going out of business? No, we can't. But one of the things that we're working on is, we have industry partners that are involved in the collaborative community. We have our federal agencies that are involved, our payers, our clinicians, our people with lived experience, our developers. And we're very aware of this issue, and we're trying to come up with what are the ways to help mitigate that. So for instance, we have a work group that's working on modularity and interoperability. So if components go bad, where can we find ways where various components of BCIs can be interconnected, so another company might be able to step in, much like they do in the cardiac space today. Whereas we're looking at, okay, how do we look at other industries to be able to solve that? So have we solved that problem of if a company goes out of business, and have that we solve that today? No. But we have work groups like the collaborative, like the modularity work group that is looking at trying to find solutions to that. And also, I mean, our federal partners are involved as well, because they're very interested in this issue. and how can we mitigate it in the future. So I think it's a really important thing for people to think about. I think it's an important issue that our collaborative community is extremely aware of. And the other great thing that we have in our collaborative community is we've worked with the Institute on Neuroethics. So we have ethicists that are aware of this as well, and helping to weigh in on some of these critical questions and how do we answer them today as we're moving the field forward.
So it's everything is in process. So that's good. The thing of it is that you are thinking about this. You are considering all the aspects of everything, which is quite wonderful. You don't have to have the answer today, but the fact that you're thinking about it ahead of time and not on the day that it happens, that's wonderful. I'm going to switch gears because we have a question from somebody. This is going to be for Dr. Hochberg, because you said you work at the VA. And so somebody wants to know about how this is being worked on in the VA. The VA is connected to this, obviously, through you in some way. So can you give us a little more information for our vets?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. This is where I begin with a standard disclaimer that nothing that I say necessarily represents the official policy or practice of the Department of Veterans Affairs. So my comments are my own and solely my own. Having said that, one of the reasons that I work at VA is I want to help our nation's veterans and who have had any number of injuries or illnesses of the nervous system. And I am confident that these technologies are going to become helpful in that regard. What I'd encourage anybody who is receiving their care through the VA to do is to look for, particularly on their local VA medical center, or regional VA medical center, the clinical trials that are ongoing. Part of one of the clinical trials in implantable brain-computer interfaces is happening at the VA in Providence, Rhode Island, which is where I'm affiliated with. So that is one place, and I'm really excited about at least the potential for not only at the Providence VA, but at others for these types of implantable brain-computer interfaces to become available first through clinical trials, and then if all goes well with those clinical trials and the devices are demonstrated to be both safe and effective, then for them to become available in the broader market, which includes hopefully in the VA as well. There's, of course, important pathways to getting there, but I do know that the research service at the VA has been outstanding in supporting this work for an extended period of time because of the clear value that these technologies have the potential to provide. So thanks very much for that question.
Well, yeah, because we want to take care of everyone, including our vets. So that's good. Now here's a question that somebody had, and I hear a lot from the community. There are some people, who will not be interested in this at all, and that's fine. They need a little more time. They want to think about it, somewhere down the line, maybe I'll consider it. But there are a number of people who will say, how can I get this afternoon? And they're ready to jump right in. They whatever it is, they're ready to jump right in on it. So I notice on that bubble diagram in the slide presentation, so valuable. That slide presentation was very, very helpful. I notice that you have some clinical trials going on, and I assume these are in small numbers, small groups of people. But if somebody was interested and they wanted to find out more about being in the clinical trial, how would they find out about that? Do they have to come to a particular area to participate in the clinical trial, which I'm assuming, or would they be able to get it more locally at home? For instance, are there different levels? Like we might want you to fill out a questionnaire that we're doing a study, so you might have to fill out a questionnaire. You could do that at home. But if you actually wanted to go in and get a device and have some kind of interface inserted into your body, in which way? How do you get involved in these clinical trials?
So I'll give step number one, and Leigh and Jen, you can jump in with the next steps that you're going to say. So step one is visit clinicaltrials.gov and search for IBCI trials or trials related to spinal cord injury or the related conditions. And that will give you information direct from the source of the institutions that are running those clinical trials. And I'll just clarify that the IBCI collaborative community itself does not run the trials. We collaborate with institutions that run trials and the companies developing the devices, but we do not ourselves run the trials. So that's kind of why I'm deferring you to a different website. But yes, Leigh and Jen, anything to add?
I think that's great. I agree that if clinicaltrials.gov is a great resource, might use the broad keyword or search phrase of brain-computer interface. That will bring up lots of options. And that website is nice because one can also select for either cities or states in particular that you happen to live in. So you can look for trials, not all of them that are available throughout the US, but ones that have trial sites that are either in or nearby where you may live. It's quite common for device clinical trials to require a clinical trial site nearby. So that's one really good way to look. In addition, as you hear about either different companies or different academic groups that are running brain-computer interface trials, they all will often have their own website. And just as you're saying, Nurse Linda, sometimes there are online forms that can be filled out to provide initial information. In our BrainGate clinical trial, which is one of many implanted brain-computer interface trials that are happening, when we get an initial inquiry, we'll often have a brief phone call with either the person themselves who's expressing interest or a family member, if that happens to be who's responding on their behalf, have a very brief discussion of just a handful of minutes to get some basic information, provide a little bit of information, and then set up a time for a subsequent longer conversation to learn about the trial. There's been at least one brain-computer interface clinic set up. I'm familiar with one here at Mass General Brigham for people who may be interested in learning more. So BCI clinic at MGB is one place that is Mass General Brigham that people can find out additional information about either currently available or hopefully in the future available brain-computer interface trials. But really, I would start with just as Jessica said, with clinicaltrials.gov and with finding either the academic or industry based clinical trials that are available in your area. I think the last thing that I'll say is, Nurse Linda, you, I think partially in jest said, I want one today, and I want to put it in my
There are
brain
people
today.
that will tell me that, yes.
Yes, and I fully support the enthusiasm. I can assure you that today will be too soon in many ways, but because the discussions are important for any of these implanted technologies, the discussion with the neurologist, the neurosurgeon, and others are one. There's lots of questions that both, most importantly, the person considering the device would want to have answered. There's questions on the clinical side as well. So people are interested in getting folks enrolled if they're interested in the clinical trials expeditiously, but it's more commonly through a extensive series of discussion that at the very least happens over a period of weeks, if not months.
And if I could just add, with the link in the chat is wonderful. It's a resource that's provided through the Reeve Resource Foundation, the Paralysis Resource Center, about asking questions about clinical trials, because there are risks and there's a lot of considerations that come with participating in a clinical trial. FDA also provides a lot of really resources to be able to understand the risks of going into a trial, what might be required of you, also what support systems you might need to participate in a clinical trial. We've also developed through the North American Spinal Cord Injury Consortium an overlay to clinicaltrials.gov. So those who are not as computer savvy to go into clinicaltrials.gov, they can use scitrials.org, which is an overlay to that to just give some lay language. But it pulls the trials from clinicaltrials.gov to make it a little bit easier for people specifically with spinal cord injury. So again, I would say for those of you that want to get that implant today or tomorrow, is that really do your investigation and spend some time thinking about it and talking to your support systems and your various clinicians before you make that decision.
And as Jen was saying, there are interpretations on these websites for the clinicaltrials.gov and the other website that you mentioned, the SCI. Tell me the name of it again.
It's scitrials.org.
SCI Trials. Okay, I was wanting to put an extra word in there, and I thought, no, that's not right. Okay, so they have information that's written for the lay public so that you can understand better. And it's always a good idea too to get this information. You can read a lot of things on the internet, be sure and be cautious about what you're reading. Check your source because a lot of people will have a lot of information that they have made up in their mind and they will talk about it, but do your investigation and then also talk to your own healthcare professional to see if there would be any reason why you should or should not participate in this study because they know your health. We don't know your health, but they will know your health and they'll be able to help guide you about, well, this might be something for you in the future. If you have neurological disease of any kind, just be sure and always talk to your own healthcare professional. Maybe you have a pressure injury that needs to get healed first, or maybe we need to heal this UTI before you move forward with this. So, be sure and talk with them, and then that helps you out your plan for the future of how you want to move forward. Oh, okay, I know I have to correct this problem before I move into moving ahead with some of these ideas. Now we're almost at the end of time, and usually my last question is for one particular for three take-home facts. But since there are four of you, I'm going to give you each the opportunity to give us one thing you would like the audience to take home from this today. So Jen, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Linda. Very quickly to our audience, your voice of lived experience of living with paralysis is incredibly important, and it can lead into really helping the field move forward and make these devices more readily available. So I encourage people to be involved with the IBCICC.
Jessica?
Jen took mine, so
Oh, okay. Okay.
but yes, I would definitely encourage everybody to get involved in the IBCICC, and I just want to reiterate that it is in your own capacity, whatever you have capacity for. And so if you're just curious and you want to see what we're about, still, I encourage you to join, and then you can start to decide how you would like to contribute. And then also, please feel free to reach out to me independently. Once you're a member, you'll receive an email from me. So feel free to respond to that, and just let me know if you're looking for a way to contribute. I can work with you to figure out how you can contribute.
And Dr. Hochberg?
Sure. Same message, third time. I said
All
at the
right.
beginning that Jen is always right. So and so is Jessica. What I will say is that for joining, if people are interested in joining us in the IBCICC, it's really only with the insights, the contribution, the shared lived experience of people who may benefit from these devices in the future that the devices themselves will be designed in a way that's maximally useful. The clinical trials are designed in the way that you may want them designed, and then we know what these outcomes measures should be. How is it that you want to use an IBCI? So we look forward to seeing you.
All right. And Dr. Welle had to sign off, but I have the feeling she would have the same take-home message as the rest of you. And what a great opportunity. Can you imagine being at the start of something that is blossoming faster than we can realize? But can you imagine being at the start of this and they're asking for your opinion if you're in the community, family members, everybody? If you are in the community, they want your opinion. So, make your voices be heard. Get in there and do that. So that's a great thing. Now, we did have some other questions that came in for this webinar that are more medical personal questions, kind of not in this IBCI train of thought, but I will answer those at the webinar at the end of the month. I've saved them. I will be answering those more thoroughly then. I would like to thank all of you, Dr. Welle, Jen, Jessica, Dr. Hochberg. I would like to thank you. This has been a most informative webinar because, you know, there's so much. We hear little blurbs on TV. We hear all these things about AI and how this is working. And here we have the real facts and all the information. So thank you, thank you, thank you. This has been a most enlightening and really thought-provoking session. So thank you very much for your participation. And thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks so
you.
much.